It was a busy day at the office of Ethan Hargrove, the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world. The office was sleek, modern, and cold, just like the decisions that were often made inside its walls. Ethan had seen it all: financial crises, life-changing business deals, and moments that tested his leadership. But today, something was different. As he sat behind his desk, flipping through documents and preparing for yet another meeting, his attention was suddenly drawn to the screen in front of him. A video was playing, one that was not part of his usual stream of emails or reports. It was a personal message, not something he'd typically watch during his busy workday. However, curiosity got the best of him, and he clicked on it. The video started, showing a young girl, no older than 12 or 13, sitting in what appeared to be a modest living room. The room was simple but cozy, with a few faded pictures hanging on the walls and a single lamp that barely lit up the space. But it wasn't the room that caught his attention. It was the girl's eyes. She stared directly into the camera, her face pale and tired, and her voice trembled as she began to speak. "Hello, Mr. Hargrove," she said softly, her voice a mixture of hope and desperation. "I know you don't know me, but I'm asking you for a favor. You see, my family is in trouble, and I need your help." She paused, swallowing hard as though trying to gather the strength to continue. Ethan's fingers hovered over his keyboard as he leaned in, his eyes fixed on the screen. The girl began explaining her situation. Her name was Lily, and she lived in a small town far from the hustle and bustle of city life. Her family had fallen on hard times, and the situation had only worsened in the past year. Her father had fallen ill, and her mother had been struggling to keep the family afloat. Their house was in danger of being taken away from them. But it wasn't the story that truly shocked Ethan. It was the way Lily spoke. There was a quiet strength in her words, a sense of determination despite the heavy weight of her circumstances. "There's an art piece that could save us," she continued, her voice barely a whisper now. "I know it might sound strange, but it's true. If I can sell this artwork, my family can keep our home. But it's not just any artwork. It's a piece that's on auction, and I need someone to help me buy it. Mr. Hargrove, I've been told that you're the only one who could afford it." Ethan blinked, unsure of what he was hearing. A piece of art. Was this really what she needed? It didn't make sense to him at first. He had spent his career making high-stakes decisions involving millions of dollars, and here was a young girl asking him to buy a painting to save her family's house. But there was something in her plea that stirred something deep inside him. It wasn't just the story. It was the emotion in her voice, the vulnerability she was showing. Lily's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she added, "I've tried everything I could to raise the money. I even tried selling my toys and books, but nothing is enough. Please, Mr. Hargrove, I don't know where else to turn. My family, we can't lose our home. This artwork means everything to us. It's our last hope." For a moment, the screen seemed to blur as Ethan sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the unexpected weight of Lily's words. His hand gripped the edge of his desk as he struggled to process what he had just heard. He had seen countless cases of hardship in his line of work, but this was different. He was used to making decisions based on numbers, profit margins, and business strategies. But this was personal. Ethan wasn't sure what drove him to keep watching the video. Perhaps it was the raw sincerity in Lily's voice, or perhaps it was the image of a young girl reaching out for help when there seemed to be no other way. Whatever it was, he couldn't look away. He wanted to help. But as the video ended, leaving an aching silence in its wake, Ethan knew that his life was about to change in a way he never could have expected. He clicked the pause button, leaned back in his chair, and stared at the screen, his mind racing with questions. Why had she reached out to him? How had she known about him? And most importantly, was he going to do something about it? For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt uncertain. Ethan Hargrove sat in his office, the soft hum of his computer, the only sound that filled the space. The video he had just watched lingered in his mind like an echo. The girl, Lily, and her plea for help. Asking him to purchase a piece of artwork to save her family's home had shaken him in a way he didn't fully understand. He had seen his fair share of heart-wrenching stories over the years, but this one felt different. Lily's vulnerability, her quiet strength, and the desperation in her eyes stirred something deep within him. But that something was quickly replaced by a storm of thoughts. Ethan was a businessman. He had made millions by making calculated decisions, by thinking logically, and analyzing everything from market trends to financial forecasts. He had built his empire on numbers, not emotions. So why was he so affected by a simple request from a young girl? Why did he feel the need to do something about it? He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the emotional haze clouding his judgment. He had always been practical, rational. He didn't have time for impulsive decisions based on feelings. The business world didn't work that way. There were strategies, there were risks, and there were outcomes. Everything had to make sense. And this didn't make sense. Ethan leaned forward in his chair, fingers drumming on the desk as he stared at his computer screen. He replayed the video in his mind. The way Lily had looked into the camera with such raw sincerity, the way she had begged for his help. But he had to keep asking himself, why did she reach out to him? A billionaire CEO who was a stranger to her. She could have asked anyone else. Why him? His thoughts were interrupted by the chime of an incoming email, a reminder of the world he was supposed to focus on. But even as he opened the email, his mind was elsewhere. How could he ignore the girl's plea? He was a leader, a man who had the power to change things, to make a real difference. But was this the right way to use his power? Could he risk everything on a decision like this? He shifted in his seat, trying to concentrate on the email in front of him. It was a business proposal from a major tech company, one that could bring in a substantial profit. It was the kind of deal he had been working for weeks to finalize. He glanced at the numbers, the projected returns, and the growth potential. The deal made sense. It was exactly the type of high-stakes business decision he was known for. And yet, as he read the figures on the screen, something felt hollow. The excitement that once fueled him no longer had the same impact. His thoughts kept drifting back to Lily. The more he thought about it, the more her situation seemed impossible to ignore. She wasn't asking for money, at least not in the traditional sense. She was asking him to do something specific, something tangible. She wasn't asking for charity or a handout. She was asking him to be part of a solution, to make a real, measurable impact in her life. And it wasn't just any solution. It was a solution that, if successful, could change the trajectory of her family's future. But what was the cost? Ethan knew that making this decision could have consequences far beyond just buying a piece of artwork. It could create a ripple effect. What if other people started reaching out to him with similar requests? Would he be expected to help everyone who asked for it? What about his company's reputation? His team had worked hard to get him where he was, and he had always prided himself on making decisions that were good for business, good for the future. A voice in his head reminded him of his responsibilities, to his company, to his investors, to his employees. Every decision he made needed to be weighed carefully, considered from every angle. But then another voice, quieter and more persistent, asked him, what if this was the opportunity to do something different? What if helping Lily wasn't just about charity, but about making a human connection, about showing the world that even the most powerful people could still care? Ethan stood up and walked to the window of his office, looking out over the city. The skyline stretched out before him, filled with endless possibilities. But as he gazed at the horizon, he realized something. No matter how high he had climbed, no matter how much money he had accumulated, there was always something missing. Maybe this was it, the chance to do something that truly mattered, to make a decision that wasn't just about profit, but about humanity. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of the moment settle over him. The decision wasn't just about buying a piece of artwork. It was about doing the right thing. And yet, Ethan couldn't help but feel conflicted. Was he willing to take that leap of faith? Could he go beyond the business mindset he had always known and make a choice driven by something deeper, something more personal? As the silence of his office enveloped him, Ethan realized that the struggle wasn't just about the decision to help Lily. It was about choosing to break free from the confines of his past and embrace a different kind of power. The hours seemed to stretch on forever as Ethan sat at his desk, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on his shoulders. The video from Lily played over and over in his mind. Her voice, her eyes, her desperate plea for help. The more he thought about it, the more he felt as if something inside him was shifting. The rational side of him, the side that had built his empire through calculated moves and careful planning, kept telling him to walk away from this emotional distraction. It wasn't a business deal. It wasn't something that would bring profit or growth. It was a call for help, and Ethan wasn't sure if he was the right person to answer it. Yet, every time he tried to move forward, his mind returned to that video, to the young girl who had reached out to him as if he were the only one who could make a difference. The truth was, he didn't have to help her. There were no obligations, no responsibilities, no pressing reason why he should care. And yet, everything inside him told him he couldn't just ignore her. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as he tried to clear his mind. He had been through many difficult decisions in his life, but this was different. This wasn't about bottom lines or financial forecasts. It was about something far more human. It was about making an impact. It was about the possibility of changing a life with a simple gesture. He pulled up the email Lily had sent him once again, reading her words carefully. "This artwork means everything to us," she had said. "If you can help, we can keep our home. It's our last hope." The message seemed so simple, yet so powerful. How could he ignore a cry for help like that? How could he walk away knowing that his decision, whether he chose to act or not, could determine the future of a young girl and her family? Suddenly, a flood of memories came rushing back to him. He thought about his own childhood, how his family had struggled when he was growing up. There had been times when he and his parents had barely scraped by, living in a cramped apartment, making ends meet with what little they had. He remembered the feeling of uncertainty, the fear of losing everything. He had worked so hard to escape that life, to build something for himself. And now, as the CEO of a multimillion-dollar company, he had everything he could ever need. He had power, he had influence, and yet in this moment, he felt as helpless as the young girl who had asked for his help. Ethan stood up and walked to the large window of his office, looking out over the city. The skyline was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, and for a moment, he allowed himself to get lost in the view. But even as he admired the beauty of the city, he felt a gnawing sense of emptiness. All the success, all the wealth, it had never felt truly fulfilling. Was this what it meant to succeed? Was this all there was to life? He realized then that maybe the key to finding meaning was in helping others, in making a real difference in someone's life. He could feel the internal struggle intensifying. His logical mind told him to stay focused on the business deals, the contracts, the endless cycle of corporate success. But his heart, the part of him that had been silenced for so long, was telling him something else. It was telling him that this was his chance to do something that mattered, to take a step beyond the numbers and embrace something more meaningful. Ethan walked back to his desk, his hand hovering over the keyboard. He could almost hear Lily's voice in his head, asking him for help, her words echoing in his mind. He had helped countless people in his life, but this was different. This wasn't about charity. This was about giving someone a chance, a real opportunity to turn their life around. And what was the cost of that? A piece of artwork. The amount of money he spent on a painting was insignificant compared to the impact it could have on her life. Taking a deep breath, Ethan made his decision. His fingers moved quickly over the keys as he composed a response to Lily. He told her that he had heard her plea, and that he was going to help. He promised her that he would buy the artwork and ensure that her family could keep their home. As he pressed the send button, a weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he had made the right choice. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of peace. He had stepped away from the cold logic of business and embraced something more human, something that was, in its own way, far more powerful than any deal he had ever made. He had chosen to help someone in need, and in doing so, he had rediscovered a part of himself he had long buried. As the email sent and the screen went dark, Ethan stood there for a moment, letting the enormity of his decision sink in. This was the beginning of something new. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he was ready to face it, not as a CEO, but as a person willing to make a difference. The moment Ethan pressed send, he felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. It wasn't the rush of excitement that came with making a major business deal, nor the satisfaction of accomplishing something monumental. It was different, quieter, more profound. He had made the decision to help Lily, and now, all he could do was wait. But as the hours passed, a heavy anticipation lingered in the air. He found himself thinking about the girl constantly, wondering how she would react, what it would mean for her, and whether this small act of kindness would truly make a difference in her life. The next morning, as Ethan walked into his office, his phone buzzed with a new notification. It was an email. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized Lily's name in the subject line. He quickly opened the message, his eyes scanning the words. "Mr. Hargrove," the email began, "I don't know how to express my gratitude for your help. You've given us more than we could ever have hoped for. The artwork is ours, and our home is safe. My family and I are forever grateful for your kindness, for believing in us when no one else did." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat as he read the words. The weight of his decision suddenly felt even more real. He had helped this girl, and in doing so, he had not only changed her life, but also the lives of everyone she loved. But it wasn't just the practical side of it that moved him. It was the emotion behind it. The truth of Lily's situation, her hope, her belief that one person could make a difference, was now part of his reality. And in that moment, Ethan realized something profound, that the power of kindness far surpassed the power of money. As the day unfolded, Ethan couldn't focus on his usual tasks. His mind kept returning to Lily's words, to the girl who had reached out to him in the darkest moment of her life. The realization hit him hard. He had made an impact in a way he had never imagined. And this wasn't about business or profits or building a legacy. This was about humanity. It was about using the influence he had not just to grow his wealth, but to do something that truly mattered. Later that afternoon, as Ethan walked down the hallway to a meeting, his assistant handed him a small package. "This came for you, Mr. Hargrove," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. He opened the package to find a simple note and a framed picture of the artwork that had saved Lily's family's home. There was also a small hand-drawn picture from Lily herself. It was a portrait of her family standing together in front of their house, smiling. The note read, "Dear Mr. Hargrove, this is for you. Because of you, my family is safe. You are the reason we have a future. Thank you for making the impossible possible." Ethan stood in the hallway for a moment, holding the framed picture in his hands. He felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had spent so many years building his company, accumulating wealth, and yet he had never experienced a moment like this. It wasn't about the things he had achieved. It was about the person he had become. In helping Lily, he had found a piece of himself that he had lost along the way. The cold, calculating CEO who had always prided himself on making decisions based on numbers had transformed into someone who understood the power of compassion. The picture of Lily's family now sat on his desk, a daily reminder of the impact one small decision could have. Ethan found himself looking at it every chance he got, reflecting on what he had done and how it had changed him. He realized that he didn't need to be known for making the biggest deals or the most successful ventures. What mattered now was being known for something else, the ability to make a difference in someone's life, to show kindness when it was needed most. As the days passed, Ethan's perspective began to shift. He started looking at the world around him with a new sense of purpose. The business deals he once chased with fervor no longer seemed as important. Instead, he began to focus on the people he could help, the lives he could touch, and the changes he could make, not just with money, but with actions that came from the heart. And then, one evening, as he walked home from the office, Ethan realized that he had been given a gift. It wasn't the art he had bought, or the money he had spent. It was the ability to see the world through a different lens, to feel connected to others in a way he never had before. In helping Lily, he had found something that no business deal could offer: a sense of peace, a deeper connection to humanity, and the understanding that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the greatest impact. Ethan knew that his journey had only just begun. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that no matter how big or small, every act of kindness had the power to change the world.